for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
all in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur.
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the spot!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe Stanley pour les Canadiens. Le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Bita TB. It's gonna be sick.
Good Friday evening, everyone. My name is Matt Ohayon, aka the Hebrew Hammer. I am back on Friday nights, but it's not my grand return. If you missed the Tuesday episode of the Sick podcast, I made my grand return after 3 weeks off then. Let's get some business out of the way. The Sick podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, who has recently been named by Deloitte and CIBC as one of Canada's best managed companies. The country's leading business award recognizes innovative and world-class companies. The best managed Canadian companies designation fuels Energy's purpose of creating progress for our customers, our employees, and our communities. Join a winning team. Check out Energy's career page for available opportunities. Also brought to you by La Bittt Tibi, brewed in Quebec and a winner of dozen international awards. La Bittt Tibi offers quality microbrewery beers made with premium ingredients for everyone's taste. La Bittt Tibi, embrace your true nature. And by XL Moto, they are the premier motorcycle and scooter dealership in Montreal for over 20 years. Our dealership carries 7 different motorcycle and scooter brands. We are the number one Aprilia and Piaggio ambassadors for the last 5 years. XL Moto, your ultimate destination and best customer service experience. I don't know if you saw this, but Tony last night mentions that he wanted a Vespa scooter forever. Well, what does he do today? He posted it on his Instagram. Guy goes out and buys a Vespa scooter thanks to XL Moto. Just really unbelievable that Tony Marinaro, he gets a pretty good paycheck from Sammy and Agnello. I'm sure that he's able to just do that at the drop of a hat. I'm not jealous. It's okay. It's fine. Also, Sammy, put up the event that we have going on this weekend. So this is really special. So at Sports La Tornade, one of our proud sponsors, we have an event. It's going to be on Sunday, and you can meet Caden Gooley, Yvon Lambert, and the rest of the Sick team from 1 to 3 p.m. That's Sports La Tornade I think it's in Vaudreuil. I was there once. I got a great gift for a friend for a gift exchange. So just make your way out there. There you go. The address is right there. It is in Vaudreuil, so I was correct. Make your way out there. Meet Caden Gooley, Yvon Lambert, the rest of the Sick team. Tony will be there. I probably won't be there because I just heard about it about 5 minutes ago when Sammy and Agnello told me about it. So my invitation must have got lost in the mail. Anyways, okay, speaking of Caden Gooley and the Habs, we're not going to kick things off with Caden Gooley, but we are going to kick things off today with our usual Friday suspect. He is from the Montreal Gazette. His name is Stu Cowan. Stu, how are we?
I'm doing very well. Yourself?
I'm doing fine. The weather is finally, after kind of a crappy week we had last week, it took a complete turn. It was a little bit cooler at the beginning of the week, but now I feel like summer is in full swing.
Yeah, in about 3 days we'll be complaining it's too hot. So typical Montreal stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Exactly. I can't wait for that, where I step outside and I go, oof, I got to go back inside. I just can't deal with the heat. Oh, well, you know what? You and Agnello were talking before the show about your pools that you have.
Yeah.
What's this? So what's this I hear about 70 degrees being too cold?
Well, mine's probably lower than 70 because I haven't looked at the thermometer, but just it's been ready for about a week, and just putting my hands in the water at night when I'm putting chlorine in that, it's pretty cold, but I don't like it too hot. 70 is not too bad for me.
So I'm not a big pool guy, but I am a big lake guy. Are you like, will you jump in a lake every now and then? Like, because like I'm trying to gauge here what your temperature tolerance is.
Well, no, I mean, my pool's in the backyard. It's an above ground pool. It heats up pretty quick on a hot day. So there's times I need to pump water out and put the hose in to cool it down. I like in the 70s, 72, something like that. But when my kids were younger, we used to rent a cottage every year in Ontario right on a lake. And it was just magnificent. The water was beautiful. You could swim out 20 feet. You could still see the fish swimming below you. I miss those days. That was a lot of fun when the kids were younger.
Well, that's like I go to my friend's country house over in Lantier every summer. We go, not every weekend, but close to it. Mm-hmm. And just whenever we sleep over, we don't wake up with a coffee the next morning. We just jump in the lake. That's what we call. We coined the term Canadian coffee for that.
Well, if I ever win the lottery or make as much money as Tony Marinaro, I'm going to buy a cottage on the lake.
Yeah, and then you could travel to it on your Vespa scooter that you're able to buy. Just at the drop of a hat. All right, let's jump into things. Interesting. I just thought of this today because when Sammy and Yellow were texting me, I have some topics prepared. The first name that came to mind was Nick Suzuki. And then I was watching TSN today and they were talking about the IIHF tournament. And I said, no, we're not going to lead off with Nick Suzuki. We're going to lead off with someone else. And that guy is Samuel Montembeault because he is just having an unbelievable tournament for Canada. And, he was coming off a pretty darn good year for the Canadians in the regular season, all things considered. So I guess my question is very, very simple. Let's dive into this together. Do you think that Samuel Montembeault can be the goaltender of the future for the Canadians?
It's the way it's looking right now. It's a definite possibility. I mean, the way he's, he had a save percentage over 900 on a team that struggled in the defensive zone. He's played really well at the World Championships. Obviously, the level of play is not as high as the NHL, but it'll definitely give him a confidence boost, especially if Canada can win the gold medal over the weekend with him in goal. So at this point, he's 26 years old. Goalies are weird. I mean, in a good way. They are. They're a different breed. Anybody who's willing to stand in front of a 100-mile-an-hour slap shot is not normal. But the thing that Montembeault has that really helps him in Montreal is just he's so calm. He's just so calm and cool. Nothing seems to bother him. Nothing seems to faze him. You talk to him in the locker room. He's always got a smile on his face. He's just, and that's so important, especially in the Montreal market. Look even Carey Price. I mean, how it got to him at times. Him saying he was afraid to go out and do groceries because he couldn't get away from it. But from Montembeault, he's calm. He's played really well. He struggled last season. One of the reasons was the injury he had to his wrist that required surgery after the season on his blocker hand. He was healthy this year and he played really good. Is he ready to be a number one goalie? I think we're going to find out more next season because I think they're going to play him a lot more. He has one more year left in his contract at only $1 million, which is looking like a magnificent signing by Kent Hughes last summer, the 2-year, $2 million deal. He hasn't had that. He hasn't started a season as the number one goalie. I think he might next year. I think he's going to play a lot. I think Jake Allen will stay there. I mean, they got to decide what they're going to do with Caden Primo too, because if they send him to Laval, he's got to clear waivers. I don't know what the interest would be on him on waivers, but you'd have to think there is some. But I think they start next season with Montembeault as the number one goalie to see, because they got to find out. I mean, Jake Allen's not their goalie of the future just because of age. He's a good veteran to have there to help Montembeault, and he has helped Montembeault a lot. He's enjoyed the role of helping Montembeault. He realizes one of the great things about Jake Allen is he realizes what he's here for. He knows he's not the goalie of the future. He's a really good veteran. He gets along with Montembeault well. He's sort of like another goalie coach for him. So right now, it looks, to answer your question, it's possible, but we'll find out more next season as I think the Canadians play him more and use him in more of a number one type role to see if he can handle that.
Yeah, I very much agree that this determination is going to be made next season. And, we've said it before earlier in the year. He's such an easy guy to root for. Samuel Montembeault is, because it started with 2 years ago, the kind of weird, it wasn't exactly the COVID year, but it was like Canada was still in COVID and it was like the States had put it behind them. And, he's injured. He had that wrist injury and he's still going out there every night. He's still battling and no complaints from the guy. So he's certainly earned it in the respect that he's put in the work, at least earned the chance to prove himself. What I always say though is, this year it was kind of weird because Jake Allen kind of suffered from the injury bug, but to me, it's one thing to be a good backup goalie and you get your good starts, you play once every 4, 5, 6 games, whatever the case may be. That's one thing to put a quality start in every now and then, but to do it night in, night out is something completely different. But I mean, hey, he looks like, an unbelievable goalie, right? He's probably the best goalie in the IIHF tournament right now. Mm-hmm. I really I hope this pans out for the Canadians, because that would just make Kent Hughes' job just that much more easy going forward in rebuilding.
Well, and goalies develop later. I remember years ago, I covered a Team Canada game against the Russians in Granby, and Ed Belfour was the goalie for Team Canada. No, I didn't know who Ed Belfour was at the time. And I remember he played great. He stood on his head. I remember after the game interviewing him, and I can't remember what round the Blackhawks had drafted him, but it was 2 or 3 years earlier. And he was telling me, I still believe I have a future in the NHL. And, the Blackhawks told me that they haven't given up on me. I remember doing the interview and leaving and thinking, yeah, right, buddy, it's not going to happen for you. But it did. He became a Hall of Fame goalie. So I'm not saying that Samuel Montembeault is going to be Ed Belfour, but there's an example there of a guy who developed later on and went on to have a heck of a career in the NHL, a Hall of Fame career in the NHL. So with Montembeault, again, he's 26, which is young for a goalie. He's been through a lot. There's no more pressure-packed position in hockey than being goalie with Montreal Canadiens, and he's handled it well. And as you say, he's a fun guy to be around. He comes across as maybe a little bit shy when we're dealing with the media, but I think he's just quiet, and he's quite funny. He's got a good sense of humor, and his teammates really like him, and he battles hard. So it's as you said. I mean, Kent Hughes. One of the reasons I think Kent Hughes gave him the contract last summer is because they did throw him in there when he was injured, because they had nobody else to play. And he played through that painful wrist injury, and I think they rewarded him in a way by giving him that 2-year, $2 million contract. But now it's looking like a brilliant move by Kent Hughes. And the question now is going to be, does Kent Hughes try and sign him to an extension this summer, or does he wait going into next year and see how he plays? And does Montembeault want to sign an extension this summer, or does he prefer to wait and see how he plays next year and maybe increase his value? So that's going to be something to watch during the offseason, just to see how Kent Hughes handles that goaltending situation. And even with Jake Allen, is he going to look to move Jake Allen before the season starts to try and keep Caden Primo and sort of a backup to Montembeault? So there's going to be a lot of interesting things to watch with the Canadians this summer, and that's one of them for sure.
Well, and the thing with Montembeault that struck me is exactly that. What you mentioned is it's the number he comes in at, $1 million. That could
be after you were paying $10 million for your goalie before.
Yeah, well, that's it. But that could be a real key to the Canadian success, because, I think as we've seen in the playoffs this year, it's the big names that are stepping up in Sergei Bobrovsky, and before this round in Jake Ottinger, who looks like he's going to be a superstar in this league for years to come. It could be anyone. Like, really, the goaltender, you just need a hot one in the playoffs. Like, people have been saying it forever, but like, I feel like, in Montreal, we've been dealing so much with just get into the playoffs. Carey Price is going to do his thing. This is what we pay him for. Well, this is really, you see what Samuel Montembeault is doing in the IIHF tournament. Granted, it's not exactly best on best, but still, he's getting paid $1 million. That leaves a lot more space to construct your team the way you want it. Not to say that he's going to sign long-term at $1 million per year, but you'd have to think that the number is less than 10, right?
Well, Vegas has used 5 goalies this year or something? Yeah, it's crazy. You see a goalie gets hot, but Bobrovsky, who, I don't think moving forward there will be other teams building a team around a $10 million goalie. But Bobrovsky's playing like a $10 million goalie in the playoffs after losing his starting role during the regular season. Again, it's goalies are weird. So it's, does Kent Hughes look to try and get Montembeault to sign maybe a 3-year deal at $3 million a year? If he did that and he turns out to be the number one goalie, that's a hell of a deal. But again, would Montembeault jump at something like that, or would he prefer to wait and see if he can get more? So it's going to be interesting. Negotiations are always interesting during the offseason, and it's going to be interesting to see how Kent Hughes handles this one. I think they'll start the season. I don't think they'll sign him during the offseason. I think they'll wait to see how things go, and if things go well, the Canes will probably look to sign him to an extension at some point, maybe midway through next season.
Yeah, and you know what? That would just, be even a bigger boost to his confidence. in the middle of the season, wow, this team believes in me. They've basically handed me the net, and I don't know. I think from what we've seen, especially this year, like it's one of those things that he's kind of a very well kept secret in a way, because if the average fan is going to go look at his numbers. And they're going to if you're a Team Canada fan and you're not a fan of the Canadians, you're going to go look at his numbers, be like, who the hell is this guy? Why? Yeah, he has he had the best goals against average of his career this past season. Yeah. And it was 3.42. Or sorry, he had it a couple of years ago in Florida, but a way bigger sample size this year. So,
but I mean, it goes against average over 900 on a bad defensive team that finished.
Well, that's it, right?
It's not too bad.
The stats don't exactly show that the Habs were fielding or icing, I should say, a AHL team for like more than half the year. So,
and I know one of those analytics stats is high danger saves. And I know he ranked really high in that also. That was another key thing for him. And the thing, as I mentioned, playing goalie in Montreal is different than playing goalie anywhere else. And Montembeault has a leg up in that. Just he knows what it's like to be goalie in Montreal. I mean, he hasn't had it with the pressure of making the playoffs. They went into this past season. Nobody expected him to make the playoffs. They didn't expect to make the playoffs. So it's not the same pressure that would be on him on a team, a couple of years into this rebuild when they're hoping to contend for the playoffs and maybe a Stanley Cup. But at least he understands everything that comes around with being goalie of the Canadiens, including dealing with the media and being recognized everywhere you go, and just the pressure of being a Montreal Canadiens goalie. And he's handled it really well. And as I said, he's so calm and cool. And to me, if I was putting down a list of things I'd want as a Canadiens goalie, if I was GM, obviously talent's at the top of the list, but near the top would be calm and cool, somebody who can handle the pressure of playing in this market.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. It's just a great story to be following if you're following the World Hockey Championships. It's just he basically, Canada won 4-1, but he really backstopped them yesterday against Finland. So let's move on to another contract talk. I'm sure everyone's just loves hearing about this, as does I'm sure Canadians. The actual Canadians do love hearing the media talk about it, even when there's no news on the horizon, which is Cole Caufield's contract. So, Darren Dreger said it earlier today or earlier this week, whatever it was. I can't really keep track of time, which is just there's no news. There's really no news to be reported. I don't know. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Or are they just taking a break and saying, "Hey, we'll talk again in 2 weeks. Go enjoy some summer vacation or whatnot"? I mean, I don't know. Like, how do you have a read on the situation?
Well, the two sides obviously have different ideas of what they want. Whether the Canadiens want to lock him up long term and Caufield doesn't want, or the other way around. There's definitely a divide between what both sides want. It's maybe a case of who's going to blink first type of thing. I'm sure they're going to get it settled. I don't think it's going to be another Kotkaniemi situation where a team comes in with an offer sheet. But I think it's just one of those things. It's negotiations, and business is business. And one of the strengths of Kent Hughes as a GM is that he's able to separate business and personal, not make things personal, which I think was one of the weaknesses of Marc Bergevin. His contract negotiations always seemed to get personal, whether it was with PK, whether it was Radulov, the end with Pacioretty, Markov, go on and on and on. It always seemed to end ugly. So, Caufield has said he wants to stay in Montreal. The Canadiens have said they want to keep him here. And Kent Hughes might also be looking to see I'm sure he has plans for the draft. He said he'll be active. He's going to try and make trades. I think the signing of Caufield will probably come after July 1st, because I think they want to get through the draft, see what they get in the draft, what deals they might do, see who they get in free agency or who they can get in free agency July 1st, and then figure out maybe they can go more towards what Caufield and his agent are looking for. And at that point, I think we'll get a contract settled. But I think it's one of those things that's going to get done. It's just a question of when right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's going to get done. I think that's the worrisome part for Canadiens fans when looking at this situation is just, if the Kotkaniemi offer sheet had never happened, mm-hmm. I don't think Canadiens fans are sweating this, but I think that's like a pressing point.
And offer sheets are so rare in the NHL. I mean, it hardly ever happens. But Cole Caufield is an interesting guy, though. I'm sure there'd be teams out there who might be interested in making one just because of goal scorers don't grow on trees, and this guy is a natural born goal scorer.
Well, it's interesting because when you think of at least when I think of offer sheets, I don't really see the guys like a Cole Caufield or, to go move it back, like a Sebastian Aho to be the prime candidates for, you don't want the top end guys because you're giving away a lot. And chances are at the dollar figure that you're going to be offer sheeting this player for, it's probably worth the contract. If it's $1 million, $2 million over market, big deal. It's not going to set your team back. You can find that money elsewhere. It's really those guys like a Kotkaniemi that could really throw a wrench into your plans. If a team just says, hey, we're going to throw $6 million at this $3 million player, you know, there's a big discrepancy between $3 and $6 million than I find there is of, let's just say 7 and 10. That's a big jump in $3 million, but just because of the value. So I would, if I was a Canadiens fan, and I maybe take solace in that like maybe the top end guys aren't exactly the prime candidates to be the offer sheet candidates.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a column last week, I think it was, about Caufield. The players who were drafted around the first round the year he was drafted and have produced sort of similar to him are all signing for about $7 million a year. And that seems to be sort of the reasonable price for a player like him at this point in his career. The thing working against him, though, he's never played a full 82-game NHL season. And he got hurt last year after playing 46 games. I mean, he was on pace to score 46 goals, maybe become the first Canadiens 50-goal scorer since Stéphane Richer. But it didn't happen, right? He got hurt. And he's a little guy, and you wonder if he's going to get hurt again. And maybe Kent Hughes and Canadiens management, Jeff Gorton, are wondering that also. So that's the thing that sort of, the sample size for Caufield isn't that huge from the Canadian standpoint and from another team standpoint. Like, was another team going to make him a $9 million a year offer sheet for a guy who's never played more than 67 games in the NHL? I don't know, maybe. But also, I think if there is an offer sheet, whatever it would be, I think the Canadiens would match it. The offer sheet for Kotkaniemi was, for that. Carolina's defense, they overpaid him big time for 1 year to get him. Yeah. Hoping that in the future would pay off, and they've signed him now to that 7-year contract. I think it takes like $4 million a year.
Yeah, if he does 4.5.
Yeah, and if he does turn into a number 2 center on the team, that's going to be a hell of a deal. They took a gamble. Would a team be willing to take a gamble on Caufield for $10 million or $9 million for 1 year? Maybe, but I sort of doubt it. And the thing with Kent Hughes, the fact he was an agent. He has a lot of friends around the NHL, agents for players that he used to represent. He'll have a pretty good idea of what's going on and what the interest might be from other teams in Caufield. But it is a little bit so. I mean, I thought they were going to announce a contract the last day when they were cleaning out their lockers after the season ended. I figured that would have been the perfect timing. And when Caufield was asked about, if he has a new contract, he went, nope. Sort of sense of disappointment there. But again, I think, Jeff Molson spoke with the media a couple of weeks ago and said, it's going to get done. Don't worry about it. Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton are handling it and they're got it under control. So we'll see. I mean, as I said, right now, if I was a betting man, I would say probably either between the draft and free agency or just after free agency, they'll have an announcement for a new contract for him.
Yeah. And the big benefit, to it's not really a knock. It's not a knock on Marc Bergevin, per se, like him as the guy, but the big benefit of having a guy like Kent Hughes, being a former agent, is that this guy's been negotiating contracts for God knows how long. Yeah. Versus a guy who played. Most GMs is just a guy who happened to have played in the NHL and he happens to be good at one thing. Be it pro scouting or, player relationships, whatever it may be. So,
well, Bergevin's weakness, I said, was making things personal. There's these, there's reports going on that the Maple Leafs are going to interview Bergevin for their vacant GM job. And I responded to someone on Twitter earlier today. If the Leafs do hire him, they better have somebody else negotiate contracts, because that's, Bergevin has some strengths, but that was his biggest weakness. And as I said, it got personal and it got ugly. I mean, I've said, Marc Bergevin GM'd the same way he played. You slash me, I'm going to cross-check you in the face. type of thing. That's how he was a rugged defenseman. That's how he survived in the NHL. He was a tough guy, and he battled and fought and hacked and whacked, and he GM'd the same way. You can't do that. Like, you can't do that. You're running a business here. You're not an athlete anymore. And Bergevin wasn't able to separate being a player from being a general manager and running a $1 billion company and negotiating contracts. Whereas Kent Hughes is more of a businessman and has more of a businessman's approach. And I've said this before. Just look at the way he handled the Jeff Petrie situation when Petrie wanted out of town. He said, we're going to look to trade him. We understand he doesn't want to be here. His family doesn't want to be here, but we're not going to give him away. If we get a trade that we think will make the Canadians better, we'll do it. And they got a trade that did make the Canadians better with Mike Matheson, and he did it. But it never got ugly. It never got personal. It wasn't. Never said anything bad about Jeff Petrie, and it ended amicably. And that gets around the NHL too. When players are treated well, it gets around the NHL. I mean, one of the reasons in Calgary that everybody wanted out, or a lot of guys wanted out, nobody wanted to go there, was Darryl Sutter as a coach, right? That old school coach mentality. It doesn't work today with today's players. It wasn't a fun place to be. And when Craig Conway was named the new GM this week, one of the things he said is, we want to make the rink a fun place to come again. And that's what Marty St. Louis was able to do with the Canadians as a coach. He made it fun for the players to come to work. And whatever job you do, if going to work, if your work environment is a fun place to be, you're probably going to be more productive and you're going to work harder. The days of NHL GMs and coaches telling players, Craig Conway had a great line. He said, when I used to play, the coach told you to do it and you just did it. Now the players ask why. They want to know why they want you to do that way. So you need somebody who can communicate. And Kent Hughes, one of his best qualities, and one of Marty St. Louis' best qualities, are ability to communicate. And I think that was one of the weaknesses of Mark Bergevin, especially when it came to negotiating contracts.
Well, that's the benefit of having someone, working in business and dealing with many different types of GMs and having many different types of clients available to him. So, I don't see it getting personal. Just for Canadians fans, let's just breathe a sigh of relief, have a little bit of patience. Hey, you're dealing with a 2-3 year rebuild right now. You can, that's 3 years of hockey. What's a couple months in a contract negotiation?
And the salary cap. As I said, he's got to sign. Does he want to sign Montembeault to an extension now? He's got 1 year left in his contract. He's got what free agents are going to be available that might want to come here? How much are they going to cost? So managing the salary cap is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing right now for a GM, is managing that cap. And for Kent Hughes, I'm sure he's taking his time. One of the big reasons he's taking his time is he wants to see how much he can afford to pay Cole Caufield and for what length while managing the salary cap moving forward.
So we're gonna move. Off from the current Habs. We're gonna. It's just, listen, Tony spoke about this last night with George Larac, and I hate bringing these things up, but I feel like it's very important to be brought up. Just these situations that keep arising in hockey with hockey people. You know what? I'm just going to leave it at that. Sammy, just roll the clip, please.
As a 20-year-old, I would probably never put myself in that situation that Kyle was in. I would have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can say that, but obviously I don't know what was going on with Kyle or anything going on in his head, but he put himself in a bad situation.
So that clip made its rounds as, Andrew Shaw was a guest on Knuckles' podcast. It's just really, to me, you want to talk like anytime you think hockey has made a step forward, it's like they take 20 steps back and the hits just keep on coming. I feel like from a PR standpoint, the NHL just couldn't have had a worse year, especially with all the, with all the players, 2 of which who are going to be in the Stanley Cup final, refusing to wear hockey is for everyone jerseys. And now you have Andrew Shaw, basically just excusing justifying what happened to Kyle Beach back in 2010 as a member of the Chicago Blackhawks. It's just really just shameful. Doesn't even describe it. I tweeted out, I'm going to give everyone the PG version right now. The real version is on my Twitter, where I said, call a type of comment coming like that from Andrew Shaw, like calling him a piece of crap is it's like insulting crap. it's really just, I was disgusted with that. Do you have any reaction to that?
Well, hockey culture is long ingrained, and it's not. They're trying to change it, then it's not going to change quickly. It's going to take. You look at these stories coming out of the Quebec Junior Hockey League now. All these lawsuits about all these hazing incidents and whatnot that went on for years and years and years while people watched. And it's going to be, it's one of those things that they're trying to change it. It's going to be the newer generation of players that are going to change it, or hopefully change it, not the older generation. Guys that were played in the NHL for a long time, that's the way they see the world. And it's an old school look at it, and they're, that's the way they are. And it's going to be less likely for them to change than it is for the younger generation coming up. And hopefully it will change, but it's not going to be easy. I mean, as you mentioned, the Pride Night things, as far as a simple thing like just wearing a sweater to make that community feel welcome at an arena was too much to ask for some players. Some using religious beliefs or whatever, or Russian players for fear of their family. But, it was wearing a sweater for 15 minutes in a warm-up in front of an arena that's 3/4 empty, and that was too much for some. And that just says, and then other teams drop their entire Pride Night things because of a couple of players. So it's gonna, it's gonna, hockey culture, hopefully it will change, but it's not going to change overnight. And I think that's just another example of how it's a long road to go ahead.
We've had the last time we had a conversation like this was when Eric Stahl, refused to wear his Pride jersey, or the Florida Panthers Pride jersey, or take part in the warm up, whatever the case was. And you brought something up that was, kind of a glimmer of hope, and and it got brought to the front of my mind because you said it's up to the newer generation of players, and I agree with you. Which is that it was Pierre LeBrun who wrote in a column in The Athletic that you got to focus on the 99% of good people, not the 1% of people who hold such views. And what better person to, it just got popped into my head right now because Andrew Shaw was actually a spokesperson, or the face of Hockey is for Everyone, after calling someone a slur. What better person would it be, especially new generation of player, to be the face of that movement, would be Jordan Harris. After what happened, he was asked about it back in, I forget what month it was, but with the Florida Panthers and Eric Stahl, he spoke his mind. He just flat out said how he believed it and how it was. And just, I think he would be a great candidate for that role.
He would. And I mean, Jordan Harris is a black player in a white hockey world. I mean, he's experienced, it hasn't been an easy road for him either. And, we're talking about this Pride Night and welcoming people. I mean, today, Marie-Philippe Poulin announced her engagement to her Team Canada teammate, Laura Stacey. Do you not want to make Marie-Philippe Poulin feel welcome in a hockey rink? It's like, it's like just like, this is the greatest female hockey player, arguably, of all time. Captain Clutch. A fantastic hockey player, a great woman. Should she, people wearing a sweater to make her and people of that community feel welcome in a rink is too much to ask. It's hard for me to understand in this day and age, in 2023, but hockey culture is an old boys, old school culture. And as I said, these junior stories about these hazing incidents, you're reading it, I'm thinking to myself, if you have a teenage son, why would you let him go play junior hockey? Why would you put him in that environment? Kids are 16, 17 years old when they go there. They're moving away from home. They're living with billet families. You're sort of trusting that the coaches and the GMs of these teams are going to take care of your teenage son. And then you hear these horrible stories that were happening over and over and over while, in all these reports that the coaches and the GMs or whatever watched. So it's going to take a long time for this to change. And Jordan Harris, and I think I've said this when I've been on the podcast with you before, is one of the nicest kids I have ever met. Not just in sports, anywhere. Nice, polite, smart, thoughtful. Just a really, really good kid, like really well brought up. You can tell his parents did a really good job. A kid who wanted to stay in university for all 4 years because he wanted to experience it. He wanted to get his degree. It wasn't just get to the NHL and make money as quick as I can. He became captain of his team. He's a really, really good role model, not just for young hockey players, but young people in general. When he deals with the media, he's always respectful. He's always polite. And he's like that with everybody. I mean, I've seen him interacting with fans. I've seen him, talking with fans in lobbies of hotels and that on the road. And he's just a really, really nice kid, and he gets it. And to me, yeah, he would be a perfect spokesman if the Canes were looking for a spokesman for someone like that. And he's a breath of fresh air in the hockey culture. As I said, it's going to take it's guys like Jordan Harris, that younger generation, that are going to change things, or hopefully be able to change things moving forward.
Yeah, I just hope we see more players like him speak out when these things happen. If players are asked about it, I know it's easy, and you don't want to always insert yourself, and that's not necessarily a hockey culture thing, to just sometimes just give a political answer.
But it's easier not to speak out. It's easier.
Yeah, exactly.
Do that. They won't comment, or they'll just sort of talk in cliches. But Jordan Harris was very straightforward with how he felt.
Well, that's it. Exactly. And some players, you can't really blame them for not speaking out. We don't know what the power dynamics are that may be in a locker room, but it's very, very encouraging to see, someone speak out, and especially as young as Jordan Harris. You'd have to think that's a sign of things to come.
Well, one of the sort of refreshing things about covering the Canadiens last season, it's a new locker room, right? Shea Weber's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Carey Price is gone. They took up a lot of space. They were the key guys in the locker room. And then, Nick Suzuki coming in as the youngest captain in Canadiens history. But these young kids, they're fun. They're nice kids to be around. None of them act like jerks. None of them they're polite. They seem to get how fortunate they are to be in the position they are. And it's been nice, as somebody who, I have a son who's 22, who's about the same age as these players, and just watching the way they act and they handle themselves, it's really been refreshing. There's a bunch of nice kids on this team who handle themselves, at least from what we see in the locker room. And Nick Suzuki and Caufield. Caufield's so good with kids and fans and everything else. And it's been Caden Goulet's nice. They're just Jack Eye and go down Kovacevic. They all have different personalities, but the one thing they seem to have in common is that they just seem to be good kids. And Marty St. Louis has said he wants everyday people in the room. He wants good guys in the room, and that's something that Kent Hughes, and they're looking at that moving forward. These are the kind of guys they want to have in the locker room. So I think the Canadiens moving forward are going to have a modern type NHL locker room, and Jordan Harris is one example of that.
So let's move off of that now. Let's move into the NHL playoffs, because when the Panthers, in amazing fashion, just eliminated the Carolina Hurricanes, who we mentioned previously on this podcast, one thing popped into my head when I got texted this stat by a buddy. He saw, I don't know if he was paying attention on the broadcast because I was just freaking out when Matthew Tkachuk scored that goal. But if they mentioned it on the broadcast, whatever, he texted me, the Carolina Hurricanes have lost 12 conference finals games in a row. That's 3 sweeps in a row. Now, obviously the streak had ended, this year, but the Toronto Maple Leafs hadn't made it past the first round in 19 straight years. What do you think, as a fan, is more painful to experience?
I would say not winning one series in 19 years. I mean, these are Hurricanes. The Hurricane fans have had a lot to cheer about, a lot to get excited about. It's a fun place to watch a hockey game. They got a great tailgate thing going outside there. The arena's right beside the college football stadium. So yeah, I think that would be. I mean, Leaf fans, it's got to be painful being a Leaf fan. I mean, it's every year this is the year, and every year this isn't. I remember last year when they were up 3-1 on Tampa, and Leaf fans on Twitter, and I tweeted a couple of times, it's not over yet. And they jump all, it's over. I was like, this Tampa team isn't dead until you step on their throat and put a dagger through their heart. And sure enough, they blew it again for the second year in a row. So no, I think being a Leaf fan would be a lot more painful than being a Carolina Hurricanes fan. The Hurricanes fans have had a lot to cheer about. And you got to remember too, and they were missing some key guys this year. Brindamore mentioned that. I mean, Max Pacioretty played 5 games for them this year, I think. It's one of their key off-season acquisitions. So for her, yeah, I mean, Canadiens fans, I think, would be happy if they'd had the success the Hurricanes have had recently, getting to conference finals and whatnot. I mean, the Canes did make it to the Stanley Cup final a couple of years ago, but no, I think I can't imagine. There's until the Chicago Cubs finally won a World Series, I can't think of any other fan base that must be more painful to be a fan of than Toronto Maple Leafs. I got a lot of friends who live in Toronto. Some of them are Leaf fans. And in Toronto, either people love the Leafs or they hate the Leafs, right? So, but I can't imagine how painful it must be being a Toronto Maple Leaf fan.
Yeah, neither could I. But I mean, it's just when I heard that stat, I'm like thinking to myself, I'm thinking, when I was younger, and I'm like, diehard bleeding red, white, and blue, and I'm like, when the Canadians made it to the conference finals, before they made it to the Stanley Cup final, they made it to the conference final twice in my lifetime, and it was against the first time was the Philadelphia Flyers in 2010. And then the second time was that year that Carey Price went down with the injury, and I remember watching the series against where I was for Game 6 against the Rangers. I was in the Bell Center, even though the game was in New York. I was at the watch party, and when they lost, 16 or 17-year-old me who didn't know how to control his emotions sat there in his chair after the final buzzer went, and I cried. So I'm just thinking, like, because the point I'm making is, like, the further you go in the playoffs as a fan, the more you start to believe. So, like, I don't know, like, you can't even win one game in the conference finals.
But then you look back, though, if you're a fan, it's the good times you had, or the fun it was getting to that point. I've told you this before. I think, my 5 years in high school, the Canes won 4 Stanley Cups. It was an annual thing. You skipped school one day in June and you went to watch the Stanley Cup parade. It was like, if you miss 1 year, you'll go the next year. Times have obviously changed, but and the thing with the Leafs now, I mean, they finally win one series, right? Everybody in Toronto's going crazy. We want Florida. Oh
my God!
Then they lose. Not only do they lose to Florida, and this whole fiasco with Dubas. It's like, this is like, what a disaster! It's just how they could not have screwed this up anymore. Like, okay, so they obviously didn't accomplish much with Dubas. A great regular season. He built a team based on analytics. It was amazing in the regular season, and those analytics didn't work in the playoffs. When the going got tough, they weren't tough enough. So okay, it didn't work. So you got to change the GM. Fine. If they had just said we're changing the GM, we're taking a new approach, a new vision, perfect. It would have all been good. But no, that couldn't be that simple, right? It had to be. First, we want to keep him, and then, he held the news conference and we didn't want him to, and now we don't know if he really wants to be, and now we don't really want to keep him, but okay, we will keep him, but now he wants to renegotiate his contract. Okay, so we're not going to keep him. Like, what a total mess. What a what show this is. And it's laughable. Like, how Brendan Shanahan, I don't know how Brendan Shanahan's keeping his job through this, because, he's the guy, how did he allow this to happen? How did he let it become such a mess that whatever personal conflict there was or whatever happened between him and Dubas? I mean, this is just it's hard to believe that $1 billion companies are run like this. We're talking before now. Brendan Shanahan is another former player who became an executive who is now running $1 billion business. He's not a business, he doesn't have a businessman's mentality. He's a hockey player mentality. And again, it seems to be something similar to what I was talking about Bergevin before. It's like letting emotions sort of dictate what you do instead of just making business decisions. And this was just as I said, watching it much, I find it fascinating. I mean, it's laughable in some ways how they managed to turn the positivity from a first round playoff win to just a total disaster right now. Going into the draft, they don't have a GM. We don't know who the coach is going to be. The players don't know what's going on. I think it's Austin Matthews has a no trade clause. It kicks in July 1st. They got to decide if they're going to trade him or not. Who's going to make that decision? To me, I don't know how Brendan Shanahan survives this or will survive this, but it's just a mess. So more pain for Toronto Maple Leaf fans.
Well, you said it yourself. Like, it's amazing to me that Shanahan is able to walk away right now and still be employed by the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, he was appointed. I was looking it up. He was appointed just over 9 years. 9 years and 1 month ago today, as president of hockey ops. Just he's gone through, I don't know how many GMs, how many coaches he's been through.
Well, this was the last year of them paying Mike Babcock $6.5 million not to coach. I think it's 3 years.
Well,
it's
there you go.
They paid him almost $20 million not to coach. That's not a good business move. That's
no, it's not.
And things from a business standpoint.
It's crazy because this guy was appointed 9 years ago, has absolutely nothing to show for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, if it's going to start top down, you go top down because, Brendan Shanahan ultimately gave Kyle Dubas the keys to do whatever he wants with the franchise. So it didn't work. That's his second GM out the door. How many GMs do you get? What's the leeway here? Because it's unbelievable. And
now they went all in. They went all in on analytics with Dubas, and now if they're interviewing Bergevin, so now what? Now they're going to go back to an old school GM who what path are you taking? Somebody I know in the hockey world who's well connected and knows a bit about what's going on in Toronto. Basically, the team was built on analytics, and it's all offense, right? Almost like playing a video game, which is great, and it works in the regular season. The Leafs are an amazing regular season team, but then when you get to the playoffs, sometimes someone's going to punch you in the face, and you got to punch them back.
Yeah,
it's like the playoffs is it's a totally different brand of hockey. Joel Edmondson told me, he said it's the NHL on steroids in the playoffs, and they just weren't built for that. So they weren't built for that. It didn't work. So you're going to get rid of the GM and move forward. Okay, but they weren't going to get rid of the GM, and then they were going to get rid of the GM, and now they're like, so what's going on? So you were going to go ahead with Kyle Dubas with this analytical approach and whatever that works great in the regular season, not so much in the playoffs. And we tried to change that a little bit this year, bringing in O'Reilly and some tougher guys at the trade deadline. But whatever the personal issues might have been, if they were going to give him a contract and extend him and believed what he was doing, why should anything personal? I don't get. I just think it's the inability of a former hockey player in a management position to separate personal and business stuff, running $1 billion organization.
Let's not let Toronto suck all the air out of the playoff talk because, we got to throw Florida their flowers, right? I mean, it's really amazing to me just because, again, Toronto connection is that a former GM of Calgary, Brad Treliving, is rumored to be, one of the top candidates for the Maple Leafs, if not the top candidate. Yet, I remember last summer when he pulled off that trading Matthew Tkachuk and getting Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar. Everyone is throwing him flowers. Wow, you got Huberdeau and Weegar. You got Florida's number 2 defenseman. That's unbelievable on top of it. Yeah. And look where the Calgary Flames end up versus look where Bill Zito and the Florida Panthers are.
Yeah.
What a turn of events, twist of fate, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. We've seen, I don't want to call them a bad team because they're clearly not a bad team, but we've seen low-ranked teams, I should say, make it all very far in the playoffs / all the way to the final. Look no further than the Montreal Canadiens in 2011, but I don't know. This team seems very, very different from that 2021 Habs team. This team is on a mission, to say the least.
I mean, the Habs 2021 only got into the playoffs because of COVID. The same year before, they weren't. Florida was the President's Trophy winners last season, right? And then they still made that blockbuster trade. And Calgary also got a first-round pick in that trade. I remember when that trade was made, I went to Florida. What is Florida doing? They already gave up the first-round pick to the Canadiens for Ben Sherrod. Now they're giving up another first-round pick plus Huberdeau plus Mackenzie. It seemed like so lopsided. And it was, I thought at the time, a heck of a trade by Treliving in Calgary because he was painted into a corner where Tkachuk wanted out, and he pulled off a really good trade. And then Huberdeau didn't enjoy playing for Darryl Sutter. We were talking about Darryl Sutter before. Sucked the fun out of playing hockey out of Huberdeau. They went down, and then Matthew Tkachuk, it doesn't matter who he plays for, what coach, whatever. coaches love guys like Matthew Tkachuk, right? Every shift is 100% effort, and he's got so much offensive talent. He can change a game physically. He can change a game by scoring. He can change a game by making a hit. He seems to drag all his teammates along with him. Even though Barkov's the captain there, I think Tkachuk is really the leader of that team. I think he's the guy that everybody sort of follows. And so Florida, I mean, they went from a team that best team in the regular season, losing in the playoffs, to the GM Zito having the guts to make that huge trade. And I thought it was lopsided in Calgary's favor when it was made. But I wrote another column this week about Mark Bergevin. One of his sayings was there's players who get you to the playoffs and other ones who get you through them. Matthew Tkachuk does both. And Huberdeau, it's really struggling in Calgary. It's going to be one of the most interesting things next season is going to be see how Huberdeau does in Calgary with whoever the new coach is.
Yeah.
Was it just Darryl Sutter who was 90% responsible for the tail off there? And there's a good chance it was, because a lot of the new cadre didn't seem to enjoy playing for Sutter either. They're two big offseason acquisitions. But for Matthew Tkachuk, boy, I mean, Bobrovsky is probably the leading candidate to win the Conn Smythe Trophy the way he's played. But I still think Tkachuk is the most valuable player in the playoffs. I mean, he's just been so good in so many different ways. And kudos to the Panthers for pulling off that trade, for having the courage for Zito. That was a courageous trade he made. I mean, Huberdeau finished third in scoring last season, or so, I think it was, coming off an amazing season. And maybe Zito just realized that Huberdeau's not the player who's going to get us through the playoffs after they struggled in the playoffs last season, and Matthew Tkachuk is. And he put a value on that. And there's so much, the playoffs are such a different game and different animal, and some guys thrive in it, and some guys don't thrive in it. And Matthew Tkachuk's a guy who just really does.
I'm sure if you asked a Toronto fan, a Boston fan, or a Carolina fan, they hate his guts. But as a neutral observer of this guy, how could you? I tweeted it after he scored that goal. Like, how could you not cheer for this guy? He is it's one of those rare guys that, sure, he talks a lot of smack, but I wouldn't put him in the Brad Marchand kind of rat category. I put him more in the Corey Perry, like, oh, you're really good at hockey, but you also happen to be a bit of an asshole kind of thing, on the ice. And you need that. You need to have that little edge to you. So I love.
We were talking about Jordan Harris before, though, speaking out about the Pride Night and hockey being open and should be open to everybody. Matthew Tkachuk did the same thing. I don't know if you remember, after the Stahl brothers wouldn't wear the Pride sweaters, and he spoke up saying that everybody's welcome in my locker room. So he's, as I said, he's a leader type player. It's Canadians fans can shake their heads. His brother could have been a Canadian. His brother plays a very similar style of game. Brady plays a lot like Matthew does, a little bit more nastiness even. Imagine Brady Tkachuk on a line with Cole Caufield and Nick Suzuki for the next 7 or 8 years of the Canadians. That would be something else to watch. So it's again, the playoffs are it's such a different animal, and you need guys you need size, you need some toughness, it's not all like analytics playoff. I don't know if they keep different analytics. I'm not a big analytics guy, but I don't know if they keep different analytics in the playoffs or in the regular season, but it's two different games, and what works. The Maple Leafs are a perfect example of what works in the regular season over an 82-game season when you're not playing the same team every second night. Doesn't necessarily work when you get into the playoffs, and the core 4 players in Toronto are going up against the same guys every night who are hacking them, hitting them into the boards, maybe punching them in the mouth. Remember Tkachuk? I think it was Matthews. He sort of punched in the head a couple times, and Matthews sort of looked at him like, "What are you doing?" No response. And that's playoff hockey. It takes courage. It takes a lot of. It's a different game, and when the going gets tough, the Leafs didn't get tough, and that's why they've won one playoff series in 19 years.
Yeah, 19 years, and the Florida Panthers, who haven't been in the Stanley Cup Finals since before I was born, are now there. Hopefully, hopefully it's a better series than the 2 conference finals we have. Hey, before I let you go, Dallas, they have any shot at coming back, or they was last night just flash in the pan?
No, I think at home, down the line, their captain suspended. They a lot to show their fans and coming out. No, they won't win. Could they win the next game? Maybe, but they're not going to win 4 in a row. That's
well. That's the thing is if they do win the next game, that's you kind of clench your behind a little bit if you're Vegas. You start overthinking because really Dallas has none of the pressure. I mean, I know that's a cliche in it itself, but at this point, if you kind of say, whatever, we're just going to give it our best shot, you're really not playing with much to lose.
No, and again they're missing Jordy. They're missing Ben, one of their their key players. I was kudos to I'm a real critic of George Parros and the NHL player safety department, but I think they got it right on this one with the 2-game suspension. And then Ben's excuse. It's too bad when I accidentally fell, my stick landed on his head. Like, come on,
could not have been a more obvious act.
And if that was his excuse to the NHL player safety board, that might have been another reason why they gave him 2 games, just because, come on, really, he tried to cross-check the guy's head into the ice on purpose, anyway.
And you know what? 2-game suspension, but really, like it was a 3-game because it happened right at the beginning of the game. So
and
if it happens at the end.
The saying is a playoff suspension, like 1 playoff game equals 2 regular season games. That's sort of the way player safety looks at it. So that looking at a 4-game suspension plus he missed almost the whole game, so it's like a 5-game suspension if you believe in that math that apparently they use. So it was a big enough suspension to have an impact on the series, and it should. It should. To me, any deliberate attempt to injure has to be a minimum of a 2-game suspension, and that was a deliberate attempt to injure a guy. That's exactly what it was. It was nothing. It was not a hockey play. It was not a hard, clean hit. It was, I'm going to try and hurt this guy. And he tried to. And so often, also one of the reasons I'm so critical of player safety, so often their rulings are based on the result, not the act.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if the player's not hurt, it's okay, nothing happened. And if he is hurt, okay, then we'll suspend. It shouldn't be that. It should be the act, not the result. So even though the player wasn't injured on the attempt to injure was there without a doubt, and it deserved at least the 2-game suspension. So this one, George Parros and his guys got it right, I think.
Yeah, and you know what? I think they may have realized, because we all know, like, the NHL officiating just hasn't been up to par in the playoffs. I mean, it kind of drops off significantly in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But just that's what happens. A play like what Jamie Benn did happens when refs are not policing the game properly.
Yeah.
Players feel like they could do whatever the hell they want, and then they do it. So.
Yeah.
That's why I feel like that was the response by George Parros. Okay, if the refs aren't going to police this game, we are.
Well, the thing, too, Stanley Cup playoffs get more exposure on American TV than the regular season by a lot. And if they let that go without a suspension, and ESPN or other networks are showing that and saying, this doesn't even get a suspension, people who are not hockey fans in the U.S. or borderline hockey fans in the U.S. are looking at that and going, what a joke. What kind of sport is this? The guy does that to a guy and there's no suspension type of thing. And it's, I wonder how much that might have factored into it also, because it was along with Ben's excuse. I accidentally fell on him with my stick on his head.
That's one, you know what? It's one of the better ones. Like, you got to respect a guy who could go out there with a straight face and say that. I kind of looked like he even knew he was lying through his teeth. But hey, I mean, that's commitment to that bit at the very least.
The hockey equivalent of the dog ate my homework, right? It was
exactly.
What would you change? Well, I would change. I wouldn't. When I accidentally fell, I would have wished that my stick didn't land on his head.
Anyways, Stu, I wouldn't change anything about this edition of the Sick Podcast. This has been great. Thank you very much for joining us, as you usually do on Friday nights, and hopefully we will talk to you next week.
All right, my pleasure.
All right. There goes Stu Cowan. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Sick Podcast on Friday night. One more time, Sammy, just throw up the graphic for the event. I want to mention it again, is on Sunday, May 28th at Sports La Tornade. Go meet Sports La Tornade, of course, a proud sponsor of the Sick Podcast. You can go meet Caden Gooley, Yvon Lambert, and the rest of the Sick team from 1 to 3 p.m. Throw up the address for those who haven't for those who haven't seen it before or haven't been before. So yeah, Sick Sports Cards, which is one of our segments, is presented by Sports La Tournette. Sports cards, collectibles, and more. Visit the store at 1 Avenue de la Fabrique in Vaudreuil-Dorion. All right, that's it for me. Thank you all for spending your Friday night with me. Go enjoy the beautiful weather this weekend. If you're in Montreal, I don't know where the weather is like elsewhere, but in Montreal, it's beautiful, and I intend on doing that starting tomorrow morning. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida Tibi. Embrace your true nature.